We can walk into a place and that'll make people fearful just knowing that it's Rollin 60s.
The name itself.
And what it carries behind it.
Like
what does it carry behind it?
It carries dirt, carries murder, carries whatever you want.
Eugene Henley Jr., a career criminal known as Big U, who used his contacts and leadership role in the Crips criminal street gang, the entertainment industry, to further his own criminal enterprise. An enterprise that engaged in murder, extortion, robbery, COVID fraud, and other felonies.
Everybody know Big U and Nipsey had an argument, homie. Everybody know Big U was shaking Nipsey Hussle down, making him pay protection fee, sorta. Nipsey Hussle got smart and say, I don't wanna pay you $20,000 a month no more. And Nipsey Hussle come up dead. He lost his protection, and the hood killed him. We all know this, homie.
When it comes to the most notorious gangs to ever come out of Los Angeles, the Rollin 60s are always at the top, from daily wars with other gangs, including the well-known Eight Trey Gangster Crips, and just causing all kinds of problems in the streets.
I mean, we've been on TV, we've been in the newspapers.
Everywhere we go, we take over. It's just like we're a nightmare on somebody's
like
street.
a plague.
To infamous members like Lil Fee, bank robberies, and their brutal Crip-on-Crip killings, this gang has a story that's wild and unforgettable. Let's dive in. To really understand how the Rollin 60s came to be, you gotta rewind the clock to the early 1970s. Around 72, 73, back when South Los Angeles was still a patchwork of little neighborhood crews. The 60s area wasn't one unified hood yet. It was a collection of small cliques, each repping their own block and handling business in their own corner of the map. Before the Rollin 60s existed as one name, the whole area was broken up into different independent crews. You had the East Side Bishops, who eventually started calling themselves the West Side Bishops. But they weren't the only ones holding ground. There were crews like the Overhill Boys, Front Hood, the Avenues, and the early group that would later evolve into the Dorset Village clique. None of these sets answered to each other. Everybody was just doing their own thing, trying to protect their turf and survive whatever the streets threw their way. Back then, the turf lines were drawn by simple geography. 59th had its own squad, 62nd had theirs, same with 63rd and Crenshaw, and all the way down into the 70s. These weren't big, organized gangs. They were just neighborhood kids riding for their blocks, getting into it with other areas, and figuring things out as they went. But in the middle of all this, some key players were moving around, people who would eventually change everything. Big Rick was already outside heavy in 72, 73, before the 60s even had a name. Then you had Babyface, who would end up becoming one of the major forces behind unifying all these broken up sets. His older brother, Ricky Slew, was right there with him, and from the Overhill side, you had Keith Stone and Big Cat, two names that still get respect when people talk about the earliest days.
What's your name, homie?
Oh, my name is Big Rick, man. What's going down?
Oh, you know, okay.
I don't do too much talking, but you know.
All right.
I'm here to,
Okay. Big Rick, you don't do too much talking, right?
No.
Okay, well,
I'm
that's
here
good.
with Player today, man. Enjoying myself, hollering at Big Player, man. You know?
Good looking, man. I appreciate you coming through here, man, and I love you, man.
I love you too, man.
Okay.
A lot of these guys used to post up at a spot called White Mountain. That became their unofficial headquarters. And keep in mind, this wasn't a small neighborhood. The 60s area stretched from Slauson to Florence, between Western and Crenshaw, 27 long blocks, from 48th to 75th. All those little cliques controlled different pieces of that huge stretch. Eventually, the name began to shift. First, it was the East Side Bishops, then the West Side Bishops. But by the mid-70s, that bishop identity didn't fit what the neighborhood was becoming anymore. So there was a meeting, one of those moments where people realize the neighborhood needs to move as one instead of staying scattered. And that's where the idea of the Rollin 60s really took shape. By 1976, the hood officially declared itself the Rollin 60 Neighborhood Crips, stepping away from Tookie Williams' West Side Crips structure and forming their own identity. There were more OGs involved in shaping the foundation too, names like Baby Huey, Moda Mouse, and Big Sidewind. Each one had a hand in building the early culture. Ron Thompson, Raymond Washington's nephew, later explained that when Raymond got locked up for robbery, the Crip universe started shifting and new hoods branched off.
What I was hearing about Raymond was that he started the East Side Crips.
So when you jumped off the porch and joined the set, you was fully aware your uncle was the founder of the Crips.
Yeah.
Now, you can't talk about the early Rollin 60s without talking about the Eight Trey Gangster Crips. These two hoods weren't just neighbors. They were practically family. Both sets came out of the same original lineage, Tookie Williams' West Side Crips. They came up under the same umbrella, same era, same energy. In the mid-70s, the 60s and the Eight Treys were tight. If the 60s had smoke with a blood hood like the Inglewood families or the Brims, the Eight Treys pulled up without hesitation. And if two members had a personal disagreement, they settled it the old school way. Straight hands, no guns, no extra drama. Win or lose, they'd shake hands after and keep it pushing. Together, the Rollin 60s and Eight Treys were two of the most powerful Crip factions on the West Side. But everything changed in September of 1979. The breakup between the Rollin 60s and the Eight Trey Gangster Crips started over something small. Depending on who you talk to, it was either a fist fight over a girl or just the kind of trash talk teenagers throw around every day.
1979, along with Tookie's arrest, was the start of the Eight Trey Rollin 60s war. So I understand the whole thing was over a girl.
Yes, sir.
But whatever the reason, a young 60s member named Tyrone got into it with a kid from Eight Trey. Back then, these kinds of fights were normal, but this time, it wasn't that simple. Eight Trey had just brought in a new recruit named Daryl Oaks. The important thing about Daryl is that he wasn't originally from Eight Trey territory. He was from the 90s neighborhood and had only been claiming Eight Trey for about 2 days, meaning he didn't understand the rules. So, when he saw one of his new homies fighting, he thought he had to prove himself. So he came back with a gun, thinking he was doing what a loyal soldier should do, and opened fire. He killed Tyrone from the Rollin 60s on the spot. Another 60s member, Bogart, got hit in the stomach. The Rollin 60s were in shock. Immediately, the 60s demanded the Eight Treys hand over Daryl Oaks, but the Eight Treys refused. They said Daryl was new, they barely knew him, and they couldn't just hand him over like that.
We had a relationship with them. Then they got into a fight. A guy from 9-0 Gangster or whatever, he ended up shooting Big Rick brother, which is Tyrone. So Tyrone get killed.
And Tyrone's from the Rollin 60s.
Yes. But the guy that killed him wasn't from Eight Trey Gangster. He was from 9-0. So at that time they wanted to turn this guy in, and they were telling them, we can't do that. We have nothing to do with it.
And that was it. A massive neighborhood meeting was called at a park. One last attempt to fix things. All the OGs pulled up. Big Rick, Babyface, Baby Huey, Moda Mouse, Big Sidewinder. Same on the Eight Trey side. It should have been a peace talk, but emotions were hot. The anger was already boiling over. Instead of unity, it turned into a giant brawl, and the whole meeting dissolved into chaos. The fight got so wild, police helicopters were called in to break it up. September 27th, 1979. That was the day everything changed forever. From that moment on, the friendship was gone. And this wasn't just another street beef. This became the first Crip-on-Crip war in history, a civil war that split the whole city. Every Crip set from South Central to Inglewood to the West Side had to choose a side. If you rode with the 60s, you became a neighborhood Crip, Deuces, the 2X card. If you rolled with the Eight Treys, you became a gangster Crip, Treys, the 3X side. That one shooting created the infamous Deuces versus Treys war, a rivalry that's been going strong for more than 45 years and has cost hundreds of lives.
It became like an arms race, and it changed LA. And what people don't understand is it changed LA in the fact that where now you had to either decide you was gonna be with the neighborhood car or you was gonna be with the gangster car. And it split the gangs of LA up.
Yeah, everyone had to take sides at that point.
Everyone had to take sides.
Yeah.
Once Tyrone was killed in September 79, there was no turning back. The Eight Treys didn't apologize. If anything, they doubled down. Just a few months later, in December 1979, they hit the Rollin 60s again. A known Eight Trey shooter rolled up on a group of 60s members and opened fire. Several were wounded. A member named Thomas Pimp Martin was killed. The 60s now had two bodies. The streets kept waiting to see when they'd respond. And when the retaliation finally came in the summer of 1980, it shook the whole gang landscape. A 17-year-old Eight Trey member named Cedric Tit Diggs became the target. The 60s didn't just shoot him, they made sure it sent a message that couldn't be mistaken. After he fell, they circled back in their car and ran him over while he was still lying in the street. For the next decade, the 60s and Eight Treys traded killings, shootings, and ambushes across the West Side. Whole generations grew up knowing nothing but hatred between the two hoods.
For that much violence and murder to happen,
unbelievable,
that involves people who didn't even know who those original people beefing was. These people don't know, they almost don't know why they're beefing.
Not
you know, you see what I'm saying? Because it's so far removed from the origin of that.
While all this violence was shaping the streets, a new generation inside the Rollin 60s was coming up. Kids who didn't remember the days of unity. They only knew the Eight Treys as enemies. And the most dominant of these young 60s was a kid named Eugene Henley, known to the world as Big U. Born in 1966, Big U was only 10 when the Rollin 60s officially formed in 1976. By the time the split happened in 1979, he was just 13, but he was already jumping into gang life. As he said himself, "I'm not the one who started it or named it. I'm just the first generation of it becoming the Rollin 60s. We were the babies."
I'm strictly Blood versus Crips. So that's a different era. So, I don't know about no arm race. All I know is the violence got real quick, actually for 40-something years.
What made Big U stand out was that he wasn't waiting for the older homies to give him a position. He built his own lane early. As a teenager, he formed his own clique, a group of kids from Arlington Avenue known as the Arlington Gang. They fell under the Rollin 60s umbrella, along with the Avenues, the Front Hoods, the Overhills, and other neighborhood cliques. The OGs like Babyface and Ricky Slew laid the foundation, but Big U's generation was the one that pushed the 60s into a whole new level of power and aggression.
I'm just in the first generation of it becoming Rollin 60s. We the babies in that.
By the mid-80s, Big U wasn't just another member, he had real authority. LAPD detectives who dealt with him back then later said, "I don't see many Rollin 60s of any age who would dare cross him." That's the kind of reputation he had, feared, respected, and known for enforcing the hood's politics with no hesitation. But Big U wasn't the only one making noise in the 60s during the 80s. Another name carried serious weight, Taekwon Andre Cox, known everywhere as Lil Fee. Then came the moment that put the Rollin 60s on the national map for all the wrong reasons. On August 31st, 1984, a tragedy unfolded that shocked not just Los Angeles, but the entire country. The story involved former NFL star Kermit Alexander, who had played 11 seasons with the 49ers, Rams, and Eagles. His family lived in South Central, just 2 doors away from a woman who was supposedly the real target of a murder-for-hire situation involving gang members. The plan was simple. Lil Fee and another Rollin 60s member were hired to kill that woman and her family over a lawsuit dispute. But it went horribly wrong. They went to the wrong house. They entered the home of the Alexander family by mistake. Inside were Kermit's 57-year-old mother, Ibora Alexander, his 23-year-old sister, Deetra, and her 2 young sons, 8-year-old Damon and 10-year-old Damani. All 4 were murdered execution style. Ibora was drinking coffee at the kitchen table when she was shot. Deetra and the boys were still in their beds. A 13-year-old boy survived only because he managed to hide in a closet. He later said the gunmen didn't say anything. They just came in shooting. The murders horrified the entire nation.
A gunman looking at her. 3 shots are fired, literally blowing her skull off. Then they went to the front room where his sister, Deetra, who was 24 and about to get married, and 2 of his nephews, Damon and Damani, were asleep. And Deetra was shot 3 times and killed, and each of the boys in their sleep shot through the head.
Lil Fee was eventually arrested, convicted, and sentenced to death. In court, the judge called him one of the most dangerous killers he had ever encountered, and said Fee had no moral fiber, pointing specifically to the killing of the kids. The case exploded on national news. It cemented the Rollin 60s as one of the most feared and ruthless gangs in America during the crack era. While Lil Fee's name was showing up in headlines, Big U was quietly building something much bigger behind the scenes. When crack hit Los Angeles in the mid to late 1980s, the whole city changed, and the Rollin 60s were right there to take advantage of the chaos. Big U later admitted it openly. We was really landing in cities, taking over blocks, and he meant it literally. The Rollin 60s weren't just a neighborhood gang anymore. They were spreading across the country, setting up shop in Minnesota, Atlanta, Chicago, and other cities where the crack market was booming. With more territory came more money, and with more money came more problems. Violence followed the 60s wherever they expanded. In 1988, 2 Rollin 60s members were linked to shootings all the way in Tacoma, Washington. Back home, members were carrying out bold bank robberies across Los Angeles. The gang was becoming more aggressive, more mobile, and less predictable. Then came the incident that would change the whole city. A woman named Karen Toshima was killed after getting caught in a crossfire shootout in Westwood, an affluent, mostly white section of LA far outside the usual gang hot zones. Suddenly, gang violence wasn't contained in South Central anymore. It had spilled over into a wealthy district, and the city went into full panic mode. LAPD Chief Daryl Gates responded with Operation Hammer, a massive, militarized crackdown targeting black neighborhoods. Hundreds of officers swept through South Central, raiding homes, rounding up suspects, and trying to crush the gangs by force. By 1989, an LAPD report counted 459 hardcore Rollin 60 members, and together, they had amassed 3,527 arrests. Everything from murder to robbery to assault. The police were hitting the gang harder than ever, but instead of shrinking, the Rollin 60s continued to grow.
We can walk into a place and that'll make people fearful just knowing that it's Rollin 60s. And what it carries behind it.
What does it carry behind it?
It carries dirt, carries murder, carries whatever you want.
Eventually, the feds caught up with Big U. In 1991, he was arrested on federal charges and eventually sentenced to 23 years in prison. Newspapers described him as a leader, if not the top man in the Rollin 60s. But here's the surprising part. While Big U was gone, the gang didn't fall apart. It didn't collapse, splinter, or vanish. If anything, it grew even bigger. An LAPD report from the 1990s made a striking observation. It said most Rollin 60s members were committing crimes for personal gain and weren't taking orders from any central leader. Even behind bars, Big U's name still carried weight. His reputation kept him relevant, and the myth of Big U only grew as the years passed. By 2002, things had gotten so serious that LAPD assigned a single detective, David Ross, to focus exclusively on the Rollin 60s. Ross later described them as the largest black criminal street gang in Los Angeles by far. Estimates put their membership at around 1,600 members. Big U was released from federal prison in 2004, and according to the public narrative, he came out a changed man. He appeared in documentaries like Hip Hop Uncovered, presented himself as a youth mentor, and stepped into the music industry. He worked with artists, opened community programs, and became a public figure far beyond the streets. But according to federal investigations and years of rumors from inside hip-hop, there was a darker side to all of this. The feds claimed that Big U wasn't just guiding artists. He was extorting them. They alleged that he used his Rollin 60s connections like a tax system, pressuring rappers who visited Los Angeles to check in, which often meant paying for protection or making donations to charity organizations that were supposedly fronts for funneling money. The word around LA was simple. If you were a rapper coming to the city, especially to shoot a video or perform in neighborhood Crip territory, you had to go through Big U. No exceptions.
But other dudes do got to, and I'm just gonna keep it 100. Just imagine this though, if another crew pull up in you guys' area and they ain't checked in with none of y'all, you gonna feel some kind of way.
Yeah, 100%.
Names floated around for years. Wiz Khalifa, Meek Mill, Chris Brown. Some stories involved artists being pressed for money, others being forced into business deals. One of the most infamous stories involved boxer Adrian Broner, who was allegedly taxed $100,000 for not checking in before hosting a celebrity game in LA. While Big U handled the political and business side of the gang, the streets themselves were spiraling out of control. The Rollin 60s became notorious for something far more disturbing than battles with rival gangs. They were killing each other. Over time, the hoods and cliques within the 60s began warring among themselves. Internal beefs turned deadly. A grim phrase started making the rounds: "You're not really a Rollin 60 until you kill a Rollin 60." The worst example of that internal violence came on March 31st, 2019, with the murder of Nipsey Hussle. Nipsey was more than a rapper. To the Rollin 60s, he was their success story, the one who made it global without abandoning his block. He gave jobs, bought property, built businesses. He tried to redefine what a Crip from the 60s could become, and he was killed by one of his own. Eric Holder, a Rollin 60s member, shot Nipsey outside the Marathon store after Nipsey allegedly called him a snitch. The entire world watched LA fall into mourning. It was the ultimate example of the curse haunting the 60s. A 60 killing a 60. But the internal chaos didn't end there. In 2025, a violent war erupted between the Rollin 40s and the Rollin 60s, two hoods that had been tight allies under the neighborhood Crip (NHC) umbrella for decades. What started as a personal disagreement turned into a deadly conflict, with members being told, "You want to get put on? Go drop a 60." By 2025, everything finally boiled over. After years of watching, investigating, wiretapping, and building cases, the federal government made its move. In March 2025, Big U and 18 other Rollin 60 members were indicted under a sweeping federal RICO case. The charges were brutal. The Department of Justice accused Big U of running a criminal enterprise that engaged in extortion, murder, fraud, taxing businesses, siphoning charity money, and ordering hits. According to prosecutors, the community activist persona was a mask, covering a criminal machine that drained the same neighborhoods it claimed to protect.
Eugene Henley Jr., a career criminal known as Big U, who used his contacts and leadership role in the Crips criminal street gang, the entertainment industry, to further his own criminal enterprise. An enterprise that engaged in murder, extortion, robbery, COVID fraud, and other felonies.
The indictment marked the end of an era. It shook LA, fractured the gang, and cast a long shadow over everything the Rollin 60s had built since the 1970s. For the first time, it looked like the Rollin 60s might finally lose the centralized influence they'd held for nearly 50 years.